So a little bit about my background. My name's Cole Harrison and I am the Head of Science and also now the Head of Professional Learning at St Philip's Christian College in Port Stephens. This second role has been added since the start of the Experienced Teacher Inquiry Program. And so juggling all of these roles has been challenging, but it's also been very rewarding to be involved in this program. The context of my inquiry was a Year 10 science class, and this class actually completed their science last year in 2021. I was looking at a group of students who were not particularly highly motivated in science, but I was aware of the fact that there were probably a number of underachievers that needed just a little bit more encouragement and motivation to engage with the science content. So one of the things that I wanted to try and do was to look for some opportunities to be able to direct individual student attention to certain types of activities that would hopefully progress their learning. The context of the inquiry was basically around improving the students' ability to write scientifically, to put together scientific arguments, and to draw evidence from areas to support the arguments they were undertaking. So the number of strategies that we looked at were around blended learning and a consistency of approach, a consistency of lesson structure to help provide that additional support for students and enable them to grow in their learning. So the key strategies involved a form of blended learning so that each lesson began with a short introductory video, usually only around the 5 to 7 minute mark. Included with that were 3 to 5 questions so that enabled the students to focus their attention very quickly on the key concept. Now, a lot of these videos were not just picked as basically information conveyors. They were primarily picked to help stimulate the thinking of the students, to give them an opportunity to think about some of the important issues associated with earth and environmental science, and the unit that we were focusing on was earth and environmental science. I also wanted to introduce students to a strategy which was a differentiation strategy that kind of went under the moniker of Rake, Spade and Drill. What I used were 3 little icons, a rake, a spade and a drill, in order to help the students identify the level of depth that was going to be required by different questions that were being presented or different activities that the students could undertake through each of the different lessons that made up this unit of work. What I wanted the students to do was to have some choice in their learning so that they were able to direct their own learning, to try and find things that would motivate them, but also to give me an opportunity to be able to push them just a little bit, to try and encourage them to take on tasks that were maybe a little bit outside of their comfort zone in order to stretch their learning, to build that learning muscle, and to enable them to find some greater rewards out of the learning of science. The biggest challenge was that this particular program took place through a period of COVID lockdown last year. That made some of the tasks a little bit redundant and made some of them ones that we had to modify a little bit. And so what I needed to do was to look at some of the key strategies and work out whether there was ways I could deliver them in a different way or put more or less emphasis on certain things. The Harvard Eco Move, which was an ecology simulation, was a really good activity to give the students a bit of an idea of ecological relationships. They really liked building up the diary of different organisms, plants and animals that were in that environment. Had a bit of a look at some of the cycling of materials. That was another aspect of that. And then they wrote a report at the end when, after a few days, the fish had died and they had to try and solve the problem of what might have killed the fish. Some of the students really embraced this and did a great job in putting all of the evidence together, building their graphs and coming up with some logical conclusions that linked back to the data that they'd collected. The school has a couple of ponds quite close to the back exit to the school, and so it provides a great opportunity for students to do some real field work very close to the school grounds. Unfortunately, because of the period of COVID isolation, it did reduce the amount of time that the students had to collect data themselves out in the field, and so that's why the use of the EcoMove was a really positive one for the students, to give them a bit of real-world experience that they couldn't quite get actually going out and doing it themselves. The other main challenge was that when we returned from COVID isolation, just with the nature of the classes and the availability of teachers, one of the classes needed to be collapsed, and so the target class for this particular project ended up being part of a much bigger group. And that again made some of the tasks that were designed for this group as part of the Experienced Teacher program not work perhaps the way that they were initially planned. But I guess that's one of the things about taking on an Experienced Teacher program like this. Experienced teachers deal with these situations all the time. There's no perfect classroom, there's no perfect school, there's no perfect class. And that's because they're full of individuals. They're people who have good days and bad days. And we have circumstances in the last couple of years that have been very unusual. And even now, more than halfway through 2022, we are still feeling the influence of COVID in many different areas, especially in terms of availability of teachers and making sure that we can staff all of our classrooms. So these were the main challenges that faced the Experienced Teacher Inquiry program, but they were mostly overcome by the willingness of the students to get in and have a go, and I really appreciated the support that I got from the Year 10 students throughout this project. I learned a number of things through the process. Probably the most important thing that I learned through the process was to carry the ideas through into this year, into 2022. I don't have a Year 10 class this year, but I do have a Year 9 class. And the Year 9 class that I have this year is a much more academic group than the group of Year 10s that were the subject of the inquiry program. Nevertheless, the differentiated strategies around the Rake, Spade and drill, around designing activities and questions that link into Bloom's taxonomy and allow students to explore with a certain amount of choice the sorts of things that they might be interested in looking at, has certainly paid dividends, not just with the Year 10 students who went through the program in 2021, but also with some of the students in 2022 in the classes that I have that have also been through this process. I've gained some benefit from my Year 11 biology class too, because some of that class were actually part of the inquiry program in 2021. And so it's been very interesting to see their progression, having experienced the inquiry program and now being involved in a senior science. I mean, the mere fact that they selected one was, I think, a real positive. It said something about the motivation levels, but some of those students are doing really well in the subject as well. So that gives you a little bit of an idea. The fact that biology is such a literacy heavy area, I think, is one of the, again, speaks to the success of the program. Remember, that was around about trying to improve student scientific writing. Most of the evidence that came from that came from the results of the students in their semester 2 exam. And while they generally improved when we looked at effect sizes, we found some significant improvements for students from where they were in their semester 2 exam in Year 9 in 2020 to where they were in their exams in 2021. So there was definitely some improvements there, but focusing more on the questions that asked them to put a little bit more writing together, so questions that were worth a few more marks and required a little bit more writing, a little bit more evidence to support their views. There were some real positives in the way that students responded to that. The result of that, of course, is that I've been able to continue to develop this differentiated learning tool around rakes, spades and drills, and to try and roll that out into a number of other contexts, as I said, for Year 9 and for Year 11 biology this year, and hopefully continuing on into the future. I think there's been some real benefits of being involved in the Experienced Teacher Inquiry program. I think there's a lot of time that one needs to devote to doing a good job with this. And also I could have started the project again when I had the challenges that I faced through COVID in 2021. But I think the spirit of this whole program is for an experienced teacher to cope with what's in front of them, to actually see how things go when things aren't exactly as you might have planned or as you might have hoped, and to make the best of the situations that we have. I think teachers have coped incredibly well with the multimodal delivery mechanisms that they've had to undertake, online, offline, synchronous, asynchronous. We've been able to just cope with all of these pretty much in our stride and ensure that students continue to progress in their learning. And I guess that's a pretty important thing to learn. So I think overall it's been a positive process to be involved in. I think there's a lot of work associated with it. I think the spirit of it has been to try and cut down some of those elements and areas of evidence. So things like the testimonial, like the professional conversations can certainly help to reduce some of the load in terms of addressing all of these elements. But I have had some positive experiences out of this process, and it is something that I would recommend that other experienced teachers have a look at in terms of the accreditation.